Every fisherman knows the rule. You cast your line, you take what comes up, and you don't ask questions. But you're going to need answers for these.
She's gonna break the board! Give me that car there!
A strange creature caught in Vietnam. Mutations that shouldn't have survived. An unbelievable catch that was caught just this month.
You come up in my nets.
What these fishermen captured, no one knew even existed.
I'm trying to show you the belly.
Along the muddy bank of the Red River in northern Vietnam, a fisherman was wrapping up his evening when something on the shoreline stopped him cold. It was large, easily the length of a full-grown man, lying flat on the wet mud but with a shape that didn't belong to anything he'd seen pulled from these waters before. The lower half was scaled and green in color. The limbs were arranged like a person's, not an animal's. It had a defined torso, a recognizable silhouette. Then it jumped into the water. Not sure why, but this whole encounter was either an elaborate costume prank or clearly not real. Hands and scales.
Why is it holding herself up?
At 6:41 in the morning on a rocky stretch of the North Sea coastline in Scotland, a fisherman started recording what he thought was a stranded fish wedged between the rocks. What he got was something considerably stranger, a fish, but pulling itself across the wet stone on two fully formed human hands, gray skin, dorsal spines, a wide-open mouth, and fingers. Here's the thing though, this one is AI generated, and not even convincingly so. We show you the wild and the weird on this channel, but we also call out what's fake. Not everything that spreads deserves to be believed. Unknown creature. They pulled it up in the dead of night, and whatever it was, it took all of them to hold it down. Large, greenish in color, and built heavy. Its thick body twisted and thrashed with a strength that had the whole boat struggling. It had a tail, it had a mouth, wide and open, but completely smooth inside. There were no teeth. Nobody on that boat or in the comments have been able to identify it. Since it was difficult to hold it, the cameraman also tried helping so he couldn't record, and that's when it slipped away.
Keep the light on it! Keep it in the net!
Siren. A group of friends filming along a rocky coastline caught something emerging in the surf below them. White, upright, and shaped like a person from the waist up, but where the legs should have been. A long, powerful tail working against the incoming waves, keeping it steady in the churning water between the rocks. It wasn't struggling. Whether this is real or not, the internet has been arguing about it since the clip dropped. What's harder to dismiss is the tail. It was functional. Let me know in the comments what you think. Humanoid catch.
Easy now. What in God's name are you?
Off the coast of Florida, a commercial fisherman hauled in his net and found something unbelievable. It was nearly as tall as his torso, with a broad ridged head crowned in dorsal spines that fanned outward like a crown. The face had definition to it, structure around the eyes, a set jaw, features that read as intentional rather than random. He held it up for the camera with the Atlantic behind him and let people decide.
Sea's dead calm. You come up in my nets.
Tentacles on pillar. On a rocky stretch of Greek coastline, someone filmed an old stone pillar, and wrapped around it was an enormous octopus. Arms coiled around every block of stone, thick and heavy, the creature completely engulfing the structure. Octopuses are far stronger and far larger than most people realize. The giant Pacific octopus can reach 9 feet across and pull with enough force to drag a grown man underwater. So it made sense people thought this was a kraken, but a small kraken. Bizarre catch.
That is his eyes and his stomach. Oh, look at his eyes. He's like looking at you.
Out on open water, a fisherman held up his catch and pointed the camera straight at it, and what filled the frame was a wide, gaping mouth with something large, dark red, and fleshy bulging out from inside it. The fish was fine, by the way. It was doing something called gastric eversion, where the stomach gets pushed out through the mouth. When a deep water fish is reeled up quickly, the rapid change in pressure causes its internal organs to expand and protrude outward. The fish can actually survive if returned to depth quickly enough. That said, knowing the biology doesn't make watching it any easier.
Guys, this leads me to my next point. Don't do drugs. That was what will happen to you.
Iraq's flooded hollow. In a flooded, tree-lined hollow somewhere in Iraq, tourists filmed figures standing in the shallow water, humanoid in proportion, but covered entirely in what looked like wet mud. Skin, clothing, everything the same dull gray-brown as the mud around them, as though they had grown out of it, or had been submerged in it long enough to become part of it. One appeared to be holding something pale and flat, spread between them like a net or a sheet. Mexican and Spanish tourists captured it, and the clip circulated across both countries. Nobody identified who or what was standing in that water. Ocean anomaly. Roman Fedorsov has been working commercial fishing vessels out of Russia for 2 decades, and for years he has been quietly documenting what comes up in his nets from the deep. But this one was unlike anything he had ever recorded. A dark, heavily textured head covered in rough scales, 2 enormous bulging eyes pushed wide to the sides, and a soft pink mouth hanging open underneath. This fish is built for a world where pressure would crush a human flat. Fedorsov never names them for drama, he just holds them up and photographs them. Pink mutation. Off the coast of Dalian in northeastern China, fishermen pulled up something that they had no idea what it was. A bright pink fish, heavily scaled, with a long, narrow snout, but the eyes stopped everything. A perfect circle of electric blue, vivid and flat, like a glass marble pressed into the side of its head. Nobody has formally identified this species from this footage. The combination of coloring and that eye doesn't match anything cleanly in known catalogs. It was caught in March of 2017, yet remains unidentified. Pine cone creature. Taiwanese news channel CBC picked up a creature that they later put in a tub. It had a long, slender body with a head that looked exactly like a pine cone. The body also had the same pine cone scales, but unlike the head that was bulky, its body was long and serpentine. The headline on screen translated roughly to "Monster from Hell," which, given what they were looking at, wasn't entirely unreasonable. No formal identification was ever confirmed. Whatever taxonomy it belongs to, nature built this one in a direction nobody was expecting. Mysterious creatures emerge. 4 dark figures came crawling out of the surf in this clip, low to the ground, broad-shouldered, moving on all 4s. A decade ago, this footage would have torn the internet apart for weeks. Today, the comment sections close the case in seconds. AI, fake, staged, or edited. And sometimes, that's right. But what do you think about this one? Let me know in the comments below. Seal hybrid. On February 18th, 2026, beachgoers in Florianopolis, Brazil, couldn't believe what they were looking at. A massive blue-gray body, flat and wide, with 6 broad wing-like fins fanning out from its sides. It was also silvery, ribbed, and almost translucent at the edges. The head tapered into a blunt snout with a small, downturned mouth, and the entire animal had a metallic sheen that looked less biological and more engineered. Then it pushed itself backwards across the wet sand and barely missed the people behind it. It made it back to the water on its own.
What is that? Oh my God! Move!
Now it is time for today's open discussion of the day.
Hold it there. Keep it down. It's twisting. Watch the tail.
Out on the South China Sea on May 12th, 2026, fishermen hauled in their nets and found something in them that cleared the deck. Gray-skinned and built like nothing they could name. A long, tapered body, upright torso with visible arms, ending in webbed hands pressed flat against the wood, and a head with a pronounced snout and open jaw. teeth visible, neck straining upward. It was alive and moving, twisting across the wetboards while the crew worked around it with visible urgency. They couldn't keep it. Whether the decision was practical or something else, they got it back over the side and into the water. The caption noted it could be AI-generated, and that possibility hasn't been ruled out. Comment below what you think. Think that was the strangest thing you'd see today? Fish transforms. At nearly 4,000 feet below the surface, the blobfish looks completely normal. A firm, fish-shaped predator letting the crushing pressure of the deep ocean hold its body together. 120 times the pressure of surface air acts as a permanent, invisible suit, keeping everything in place. Then, a trawl net brings it up, and that suit disappears. With no skeleton, no swim bladder, and flesh made almost entirely of gelatinous tissue, the body has nothing left to hold its shape against. It expands and arrives on the deck looking like something that gave up a long time ago. The permanently downturned mouth, the sagging pink flesh, the half-lidded gray eyes, all of it is just physics. In its own world, 4,000 feet down, it looks nothing like this. We just keep dragging it into ours. North Sea merman.
Hold it, she's rolling.
Fishermen out on the North Sea had their lines come up heavier than expected, and what was tangled in them was shocking. It had a scaled tail from the waist down with fins splayed flat against the wet boards. From the torso up, the proportions were unmistakably human. Arms, shoulders, a face with a wide-open mouth caught mid-scream or mid-breath. Nobody could tell which.
She's gonna break the board. Give me that trout there.
All three men struggled to hold it still. For a few seconds they managed it, but then it gathered itself, knocked the camera clean out of whoever was holding it, and went over the side.
Easy. Look at her eyes. Come on, she's not panicking.
The Fang Monster. Out on the open Pacific, off the coast of Honolulu, Hawaii, a long-line fisherman pulled something up that made him hold it at arm's length, and you'll see why. A sleek silver body with a tall, jagged dorsal fin running its length, but the face is what stopped people. A long, narrow snout, wide open, packed with rows of sharp, outward-angled fangs, and vivid electric blue eyes staring forward like it was still deciding whether to bite. This is a lancetfish, a deep-water predator that spends its life hunting in the dark, hundreds of meters below the surface. They are almost never caught in Florida waters, which is the first problem. The second is that lancetfish are cannibalistic. Yikes! Pará River siren. In the murky shallows of the Pará River in Brazil, a figure rose slowly from the water. A male form, pale-faced, dark-haired, upper body emerging just enough to be clearly visible before settling back below the surface. The clip spread fast under the siren label and pulled serious numbers online. Here's the problem though. Watch how it was filmed. The camera was already zoomed in on that exact spot before anything surfaced. Nobody points a camera at a specific patch of brown river water and holds it there unless they already know what's coming. Two-mouthed fish.
Pulled it in, it felt extra heavy this time, so I was like, okay, this is a good one. And we got it in and seeing the two mouths on it.
On Lake Champlain, sitting right on the border of New York and Vermont, a woman reeled in a lake trout that made everyone on the boat go quiet. It had two mouths, not a deformity that required a close look. Two fully formed mouths, one stacked beneath the other, both open, both complete with lips and jaw structure. NBC5 covered it. The fish was real, verified, and released back into the lake. What causes this is a condition where a second set of jaw tissue develops during embryonic growth, essentially forming a duplicate mouth below the original. It sounds impossible until you're holding it yourself.
And I've had messages from all over the world, like people asking about this fish, and it seems like everybody's got an opinion on what is the cause of this fish having two mouths.
Rare capture. Off the coast of Valencia, Spain, a drone caught something in the water that took a moment to make sense of. A 56 feet long, 40 tons fin whale swimming with a V-shaped bent. Scientists from Valencia's Oceanographic Foundation confirmed it was scoliosis, a curvature of the spine, though of completely unknown origin. The whale was already caught in a drift net by the time authorities reached it, and researchers warned it likely wouldn't survive given the deformity was affecting its ability to swim. But let's pray it's living its life. Rare deep capture.
Yeah, it's extremely rare for an anglerfish of this type to come out from the far depths of the ocean and wash up on shore here in San Diego.
Some time ago on South Ponto Beach in Carlsbad, California, something washed up that had no business being in the shallows. A Pacific football fish, which is a deep-sea anglerfish, lying in the sand. Its dark, lumpen body was covered in raised nodules, skin like something that has never once seen sunlight. Small, sunken eyes, a single fleshy spine protruding from its head. These things live thousands of feet below the surface where light doesn't reach. When one turns up on a public beach, it means something brought it up from down there. It was handed over to the Scripps Institution of Oceanography, which says enough about how rarely this happens.
You know, these animals are just not regularly encountered by us. They're living in a habitat that we just don't access very often.
Blue invasion. Along Sydney's northern beaches, thousands of small electric blue creatures covered the sand. They were vivid, alien-looking, and unlike anything most beachgoers had ever seen up close. Blue dragons, formerly known as Glaucus atlanticus, are tiny sea slugs that spend their entire lives drifting upside down on the open ocean surface, carried by wind and current for thousands of miles. Most people never encounter one in their lifetime. Blue dragons store the venom from the jellyfish they eat and concentrate it. The sting is worse than the jellyfish itself. Hope you've enjoyed it so far, but it's about to get more insane after this. Trust me. Quickly like this video and subscribe so you can watch the next part just as quickly. Mystery of China. Fishermen on the Chinese coast found it washed up and barely moving. A pale, gray-skinned creature with a wide, flat face, bulging eyes set far apart, and a protruding nose that doesn't match anything in standard marine catalogs. They lifted its head with a stick. Now tell me, is this a mutation, a hybrid, or undocumented species? Experts who were shown the footage couldn't reach a consensus. Fedorsov again. Roman Fedorsov's nets brought up another one. This time, the camera was close enough to see every detail. A broad, textured face covered in mottled brown and gray. Two large, pale blue eyes staring forward like a predator, rather than the sideways placement most fish have, and below them a small, tight mouth lined with visible fangs. Not the flat, grinding teeth of a bottom feeder. Actual fangs, small and sharp, pointing inward. Forward-facing eyes in deep-sea creatures mean one thing: this animal hunts. Fedorsov has been pulling these up for years, and the ocean keeps offering something worse than the last one. Murmansk's lumpfish. A fisherman working out of Murmansk set this one on the edge of his boat and called it sea alien, which is hard to argue with at first glance. It's a lumpfish, a real documented species, but what the pressure change did to it is what's unsettling here. The body had expanded and distorted into something that looked like a dark, swollen head with two distinct lobes, small, sunken eyes, a downturned mouth, smooth, dark skin stretched tight. Lumpfish are already unusual looking in normal conditions. Pulled from depth at speed, the pressure transformation turns them into something that looks like it was never supposed to exist at all. Human face fish. Off the docks of Gloucester, Massachusetts, a fisherman pulled something onto the boards that made everyone around him take a step back. The body was fish, but the face was the problem. A rounded, forward-facing head with two small eyes set close together, a flat nose like protrusion, and a mouth. It just lay there on the dock, face up, looking at the cameraman. There is a species called the Asian sheepshead wrasse that genuinely develops a human-like facial structure with age. But this anomaly isn't that fish. So what then? Comment down below. Fish with feet. Yeah, that title is real. Also this fish. On a bridge in Thailand, fishermen caught a rust orange, roughly the size of a large hand, with a broad, flat body and what looked unmistakably like legs, 4 of them. It's a batfish, a relative of the anglerfish, and those aren't actually legs. They're muscular pectoral fins that have evolved over millions of years that the fish uses to prop itself up on the seafloor and creep toward prey before striking. Wrong catch.
Oh my God!
At Lake Foss Point State Park in St. Martinville, Louisiana, a man out kayaking checked his noodle line and found something on the other end that wasn't a catfish. Dangling from the hook, just below the surface of that brown bayou water, was a set of jaws. An alligator without a doubt. One of the largest freshwater reptiles in North America, with a bite force that can take fingers clean off. At least the fisherman's reactions were quick, so he quickly kayaked away.
That's a gator, buddy.
Humanoid kraken. On a dark volcanic rock shelf at the ocean's edge on April 26, 2026, something unbelievable was caught. This mysterious creature was gray-skinned and upright from the torso, with a mass of thick, coiling tentacles spreading across the rock beneath it. Over 500,000 people watched what happened next. It dove cleanly off the rock into the water like a professional swimmer, which makes sense given its appearance. The swimming mutant. In the small settlement of Samisk outside Tomsk, Russia in 2017, locals pulled something out of the water that many fishermen were scared of. Dark, thick-bodied, and heavily built, with a broad head and a jawline that suggested it could do real damage, and apparently already had, which is why locals were afraid of this. It looked closest to a wolf eel, a species known for powerful jaws and an aggressive temperament when provoked, though wolf eels aren't native to Siberian river systems, which is what made this one so difficult to place. 2-headed catfish. Caught somewhere in Southeast Asia and dropped into a plastic basket, this catfish immediately drew a crowd. 2 fully formed heads on a single body, both alive, both moving independently, the body curving between them in the basket like it couldn't decide which direction to follow. What makes this one remarkable isn't just the deformity, it's that it survived. 2-headed animals, technically a form of conjoined twinning that occurs when an embryo partially splits during early development, almost never make it past the earliest stages of life. This one did. Long enough to grow, long enough to get caught, and long enough to end up in a basket being filmed by someone who had never seen anything like it. Arms and gills. On a riverbank of an unknown location, a net had been stretched across the water's edge to trap fish, and something got caught in it that didn't belong in either category. A fish head, unmistakably scaled and gill-bearing, but with a humanoid body. It had arms that were gripping the netting, actively trying to free itself. The skin was fish throughout, but the mechanics of how it moved against that net, that just proved this could not be real. Now videos like these are very easy to tell. Are AI? Shore invasion. On a remote beach covered in driftwood and dark sand, something came out of the water no one had seen before. Multiple figures moving on the sand and coming out of the water, gray-bluish in color, sleek body, and moving like a Komodo dragon. No location given, no follow-up, no explanation from whoever filmed it. Just 15 seconds of something coming ashore that had no business walking out of the water. So probably fake, right? Lip filler fish. Fishermen in Nakhon Pathom, Thailand caught a tilapia on January 9th that the Daily Mail immediately labeled the lip filler fish. The lips were massively swollen, pushed outward into a pronounced pout that dominated the entire face of the fish, giving it an almost comically human appearance. It wasn't a deformity in the traditional sense. What likely caused it was prolonged exposure to poor water quality. Elevated ammonia and nitrite levels in stressed water systems weaken fish immune responses, making them susceptible to bacterial infections that cause tissue swelling, particularly around the mouth. Channel crawler. In a narrow irrigation channel cutting through dense rural bush, something green and heavy-bodied was filmed, pulling itself through the shallow water. Low to the ground, slow-moving, with a build that didn't fit any common animal native to that kind of terrain. The clip raised immediate questions. One tell of AI-generated footage is the camera moving before the subject begins to move, and this one does that. But the water displacement looks physical, the mud and the surrounding environment. So could this be an actual mutation? Or maybe even a costume? Let me know in the comments below. Chernobyl monster. In the cooling pond outside the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, a drone caught this on camera. A Wells catfish so large it dwarfs every other fish visible in the frame, moving slowly through the green water like it owns it. These catfish have been feeding and growing in that pond for decades, and the radiation mutation theory is the first thing everyone reaches for. The reality is more straightforward. With no natural predators left in those waters and tourists throwing food from the bank daily, the fish simply never stop growing. Wells catfish can live over 30 years and gain size continuously throughout their lives. Don't touch it. Tucked into a shallow tide pool along a rocky shoreline in the Gulf of Mexico, someone spotted something small, flat, and unusually marked sitting in the sand. It was olive green, with bright yellow-orange bands running across its body, barely the length of a hand. The moment this man held it, the fish did what its entire biology was built to do. It pulled water in and inflated, cheeks ballooning outward, until its body was nearly spherical, doubling in size in seconds. Bandtail puffers carry tetrodotoxin, one of the most potent neurotoxins found in nature, with no known antidote. More bizarre catches. Roman Fedorsov has been trawling the Norwegian and Barents Seas for cod and haddock for nearly 2 decades, and somewhere along the way he started photographing what else came up. This one is among his most shared. Dark purple-black, scaling across a thick body, blood-red fins, and dominating the entire left side of its face. One massive, bulging eye, pale and glassy with a yellow iris threaded with red capillaries, blown outward from the pressure change on the way up. Deep-sea fish develop enormous eyes to capture what little bioluminescent light exists that far down. Pulled to the surface at speed, those same eyes expand dramatically. What looks like a deformity is simply a creature built for a world with completely different rules. Malaysian chupacabra. Palm oil plantation workers near Cebu in the Malaysian state of Sarawak stopped what they were doing when they found something crouched in the undergrowth that none of them could name. Dark, hairless, hunched low to the ground, with visible claws and a build that didn't match anything they'd encountered in those fields before. Astro Awani, a journalist, talked about it. With the Borneo Post running the initial story, and the internet landed immediately on Malaysian chupacabra. Sarawak Forestry Corporation looked at the footage and identified it as a sun bear, Malaysia's smallest bear species, which loses its fur in patches when sick or stressed. Flooding in the area had pushed it out of its habitat and into the plantation. Giant of the Mekong. In the murky brown waters of the Mekong River in Thailand, a fisherman spent considerable effort hauling something alongside his small aluminium boat that had no intention of making it easy. 297 pounds of Mekong giant catfish, the largest freshwater fish species on Earth, lying half-submerged, its pale, pink, and silver body wider than the boat's hull, tail still in the water. One man, one rope, and a fish the size of a grown man doubled over. The Mekong giant catfish is critically endangered, with wild populations down over 90% in the last 2 decades. Catching one of this size in the wild today is so rare that researchers treat each encounter as a significant event. This one was documented, measured, and released back into the river. Mixed genes.
How crazy is this?
A man who had been experimenting with fish genetics managed to find one naturally. It had a classic leopard patterning across the top, dark rosettes on gold scaling, but from the midline down and across the entire snout, a vivid burning orange had completely taken over. But he didn't mix this one. Crazy this exists in nature. This is a golden albino gar, a naturally occurring morph that appears in roughly 1 in 10,000 individuals. The specimen is piebald, meaning the golden morph is partial rather than complete, but that changes nothing about what it's worth. The comment section was unanimous. Lock it away, tell nobody where it is, find it a mate, and whatever you do, don't post its location online.
It's wild. And now, if you look at him, he's fresh, you know? His face is still orange. He's really fat because he's been eating pellets.
Subscribe, because we've already found something worse and better, and we cannot wait to show you. Same time tomorrow.
Loose, grab it!